What an incredibly impressive and erudite panel, and I'm honored to be included in your midst and have learned an enormous amount. It's always a little frustrating when you're scheduled to be on the program and you really just want to spend all your time taking copious notes on what your colleagues are saying, but thank you for that. I attended the plenary session this morning and was struck by the fact that a number of the participants in that session chose to depart from their prepared remarks, and I will be doing likewise today. I want to reflect perhaps a little more deeply on the topics and issues that are before us. And I want to begin by addressing another elephant in the room. Pasquale, you spoke about an elephant in the room referencing capitalism, but the 5-ton elephant that I would like to address my remarks to in part today are the horrific events of just a few days ago in Paris, which I think are on the minds of every single one of us here. The world and each of us personally are grappling with the question, how has an ideology as evil, as hateful, and as vicious as ISIL's taken root, falsely wearing the mask of religious belief, in the minds and hearts of thousands and maybe tens of thousands of young people from around the world, including an astonishing number from the largely free, tolerant, and prosperous nations of the world, nations like France, like the United States, like Great Britain, and we can think of many others. I don't know about you, but I know that I am not satisfied with the various explanations I have heard offered up thus far. One of the things we hear said with considerable frequency is that a combination of high unemployment, embedded discrimination within these societies, a lack of integration and assimilation, are part of the explanation for this deeply disturbing trend that we see. These troubling circumstances are most certainly real, and yet I do not believe that they can begin to explain the recruitment that we are seeing. That is not an acceptable explanation. Sadly, we know there are many places in the world, many societies, many countries grappling with very similar problematic conditions and ingredients for unrest and discontent. And yet, the outcome is not a turn towards such unbelievable nihilistic violence. Another explanation that I have heard offered, sometimes with a kind of a curious admiration, underlying admiration, is that ISIL or Daesh has very, very sophisticated ways in which they use social media. We've heard that, haven't you? Oh, it's their incredibly sophisticated use of social media. I do not find this persuasive at all. Indeed, from what I understand, and I can assure you I avoid any exposure to ISIL's social media, it uses its highly sophisticated tools and technology and understanding in its media operations to portray and to glorify its barbaric practices that to any normal human being are so repugnant, so utterly revolting, that far from serving as a recruitment tool, we would think that any such depictions would send any human being or somebody worthy of that name and title running in the opposite direction. I think we need to probe our cultures and souls a little more deeply to try and answer the question of what is going on. By no means do I think I have all the answers. I maybe don't have any answers. But what I do have and what I want to share with you today are some thoughts that may be a starting point for all of us in seeking answers. First, I think we need to acknowledge the proven fallacy of the so-called secularization thesis, which not so long ago posited that as nations and societies became better educated, more prosperous and modern, that religion and faith would be overtaken by a kind of rational secularization, and that religion itself would become little more than a sort of vestigial appendage characterized by some interesting and maybe affectionate cultural remnants and traditions. Well, apparently, upwards of 3/4 of the world's population just didn't get the secularization memo. And we can see now that in society after society, this thesis has been proven to be mistaken. And yet, this sort of values-neutral, or perhaps more accurately stated, faith-neutral ethic has nonetheless permeated our modern, at least Western, DNA. It has very much been the modus operandi of so much of the world's political, financial, academic, and cultural elite that we find ourselves in a moment that, for me at least, calls to mind William Butler Yeats' famous poem, interestingly titled The Second Coming, in which he writes the following words, and I quote, "The blood-dimmed tide is loosed, and everywhere the ceremony of innocence is drowned. The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity." The best lack all conviction, while the worst are full of passionate intensity. Let me say that I believe that those of us gathered here do represent the best, and I am honored and frankly inspired and very humbled to be among you. But my friends, may I suggest that it is we who must be filled with passionate intensity. And I think I'm here echoing my friend Akhan's words at the end of our lunch. Those of us who believe passionately and profoundly in the centrality of religious freedom to the whole human rights project, to democracy, to equality, to sustainable development in all its dimensions, and to the fundamental dignity of each human being, we have the duty to bring a righteous and a loving fervor to our defense of the freedom of religion, conscience, and belief that equals and exceeds that of the forces of evil. We must have that old-fashioned attribute that we used to call the courage of our convictions. We must not leave the young generation to ponder unaided the emptiness of a world that sends the message that they should seek their life's purpose and satisfaction in the pursuit of materialism, ever more clever and comprehensive technology, hedonism, and the relentless competition for success. They know, they can feel that this is a fruitless pursuit, and they can also feel the huge gaping hole it leaves in their heart. And for too many, the fierce, unquestioning, apocalyptic faith of the jihadists offers a way of filling that aching, gaping hole. My friends, I strongly, indeed, I passionately believe that religious freedom, its defense, its advancement, is absolutely central to meeting this grave challenge of our day. When freedom of religion, conscience, and belief is robustly protected by societies, it promotes social tolerance, creates a free marketplace of ideas, including religious ideas, and ultimately enables evil ideologies like those of ISIL to be defeated by far better ideas and beliefs. But this free marketplace of ideas must make respectful place for the voices of religion and faith, so that for the majority of humanity that are drawn to ponder life's deepest questions and seek meaningful, truthful, authentic answers, they feel welcome and included in that shared civic space. When this happens, I am confident that religious freedom will not continue to be a victim of religious extremism, but will in fact prove to be its most powerful antidote. I'd like to close my remarks today with a story that I think beautifully, for me, illustrates the profound connection between religious freedom and all the other precious rights that we so cherish. John Wycliffe, the English philosopher, theologian, reformer, and preacher, undertook to translate the Bible from the Latin Vulgate into the common vernacular in the late 1300s. And he did so in the face of enormous opposition from, and really even persecution, from the ecclesiastical authorities of his day. Despite all, he persisted in this mission. And when his work was done, he wrote the following words in the flyleaf of that first Bible. And I quote, "The translation is complete and shall make possible government of the people, by the people, and for the people." Now, for the Americans in the audience, we all immediately associate those immortal words with our greatest president, Abraham Lincoln, at a time when the American project was embattled, and he spoke at the battlefield of Gettysburg. But in fact, it has a more ancient patrimony. We cannot know precisely what Wycliffe meant when he wrote those words, but I believe he was illuminating for all of us the profound insight that when men and women are free to pursue and understand truth for themselves, they become empowered to build societies that honor the claims of conscience and the fundamental liberties and rights of all people. Thank you very much.